Greetings, travelers, adventurers, and fellow keepers of the lake. Today I have an interesting topic where I've been playing a Cartomancer Witch in Pathfinder 1 for a couple of sessions, and it really led me down a rabbit hole where I started exploring all the things regarding divination decks. So Taro, Harrow, Taroka, all that good stuff, and it really got me thinking, like, why is it that people really do divination and fortune telling through cards? For example, if you're role playing, why do you throw dice for like some things and some events to unfold, but people really prefer cards over dice, for example, for fortune telling stuff? This will consist of 5 videos, where the first one will be this one, like a psychological analysis. The second one will be about Harrow and how to do the spreads, how to do the reading, all that stuff. The third one will be basically an analysis and a tutorial about Taroka. Then we will be talking about reading tricks and how to interpret the cards, different types of reading, all that. So stay tuned and let's roll the intro. So why use cards? Well, I think for some people it is enough to ask a yes/no question and just throw a die, but for others there is a plethora of different associations that you make while looking at the numbers, at the symbols, at the colors. So they want that almost synesthesia of association to happen, whereby you get a feeling of like some deeper synchronicities happening on the spot and giving you insight, be it spiritual guidance or something that's just psychological introspection. Some just want to feel like there are unseen rules of the universe that are unfolding through these powerful symbols that you have in front of you. So even though these are very much stigmatized in the modern world, and don't get me wrong, a lot of people are very inclined to tarot and things like that, even with the stigma, I think like the occult basically reinforces why we like it in our games. And humans are intrinsically fascinated by these fortune-telling devices, and I could certainly say that for us RPG players, where every setting has a cult, has dark magic, light magic, all that stuff, I think these cards that are perceived as both sometimes a good thing and a bad thing, I think they really like shine in this sort of settings. So I would like to ask a question: why does a tarot card look like it does? Disclaimer, I have never read tarot, have been read tarot or anything like that. This is only me information dumping and thinking out loud about the topic that I've been diving in while preparing for my next character. So the topic is divination decks. What is divination? Well, basically it's an interpretation of random patterns trying to predict something about or analyze something about the present, the past, or the future. Why I think this video is important is because, first of all, we need to distance ourselves from being read tarot as a person and being read tarot as a character. And when I say tarot, I will use the terms tarot and RPG divination decks interchangeably. So whichever divination deck you are using, it is important to make the distinction between you and your character. There are some fallacies in like getting the reading, something called Barnum-Fourier effect. It is basically a phenomena where individuals are given statements that sound tailored specifically to them, but are actually vague enough to cover a wide range of different individuals. There is also confirmation bias, where something you already think is true, you're just finding confirmation. You have a bias to find confirmation in whichever thing you're seeing. So, for example, if you're searching something online and to confirm your opinion, you will be more likely to find the thing that confirms your opinion. Same thing goes with cards. There is also a thing that happens to people called apophemia, which is basically you perceiving patterns in something that's not that connected. You perceive meaningful patterns in it. And of course, there is a self-fulfilling prophecy fallacy, which is basically you pushing yourself subconsciously to make some prophecy come true. Just remember, all these fallacies and things are something that could happen to you, and experienced readers are absolutely like trying to constantly be free of these fallacies, and it takes time. And also, when I say experienced readers, I think it makes much more sense for you to make some form of like informed introspection through analyzing symbols if you are reading it to yourself. If you're reading it to someone else, they are susceptible to all of their fallacies and these biases. So for you as a character, as a player, whose character is getting the reading. It is important for you to understand these fallacies and biases so that you can simulate them. You're not the one that's being read cards. Your characters are. They are in a magical world. They might have, like, think how your character would, like, go through, for example, something like self-fulfilling prophecy fallacy and, like, manifest the reading. Of course, maybe your DM or you as a DM wanted to make a really, like, a reading that will come true, and that's fine. But, for example, maybe the character gets something different and starts, like, trying to fulfill his own perception of the reading, which I think is, like, it just makes the character way deeper. Still, if you start perceiving these readings from an imaginary world as like science for you, and you start, like, noticing some stuff that maybe plays around with your own personality, you're in luck. Maybe that's therapy for you, because it turns out that there's a research from, let me see, Department of Educational Psychology and Leadership Studies in France, and they are doing tarot cards as a tool for self-reflection. Yeah, that exists. I will put it in the description if you want to dive deeper and you maybe find something interesting. Right, so Taro, let's talk about Taro. Let's face it, we cannot talk about our RPG divination decks without talking about Taro. So it's basically a deck that has originated around 1700s to 1800s. There is, like, an anonymous document claiming that Taro exists now, I guess. And the story that I've found online, and I have no idea if this is true in any way, is that the church banned playing cards. People made church-inspired playing cards with, like, iconography of the church in, like, medieval Europe, Renaissance Europe, something like that. They were approved. There was a trick-taking game which people played, and over time they really changed, like, the decks and the rules and everything. Right now there actually is a game that you can play with Tarot, but also people use it for divination purposes, and it's more popular in that way, and that's because of the two decks that are now the most popular. And I really want to emphasize here, like, these two decks, they originated in different times, and they have pretty different vibes because of the times they were created in. Take a note about this vibe that you could maybe use if you ever want to create your own decks. So all the tarot decks have 78 cards, major arcana that are 0 to 21 cards, and they are mostly representing some, like, mystical things, some bigger questions in the universe. And you have the minor arcana, which is has motifs and is representing more like daily, regular, everyday stuff. And also you have the court cards that are something that should give you, like, some form of introspection about yourself. Again, not an expert, this is my understanding of how this works. I just wanted to put it out there. Okay, so the top two decks that exists are, first of all, Thot Taro, which is conceived in 1938. I think it was finished around 1943, and it was made by the infamous Aleister Crowley and Lady Frida Harris. This deck, first of all, it originated in the peak of the World War II. Crowley is a very famous person in the occult, and you might have heard some things. And yeah, I mean, the whole, like, energy around it is very dark in a sense that this is the deck that inspires all the stigma and all the occult that people think about when they hear the word tarot. Now, don't get me wrong, for all intents and purposes, like, Crowley's symbols are by many described as very deep and very interesting, and I'm not trying to disprove the legitimacy of these decks, but I want you to, like, look at the vibe, maybe do some research, see how people are perceiving it, why they're perceiving it in this way. It's very interesting stuff. The second one is the Ryder Smith deck. It was conceived in 1909, and yeah, it was finished and published in that year, but I think that the biggest boom was the A deck. It's literally called, like, the A deck, and it was released 1910 to 1920, and that's when it had its boom. The interesting thing is, this is the period in history where the biggest psychologists and, like, scientists were thinking about the collective, like, consciousness, subconsciousness. They were doing all sorts of experiments, asking questions about the universe. Also, that was the period where people were trying to talk to ghosts. People were very inclined to that supernatural type of thing. Also, Lovecraft was from that period, and a bunch of his works were also from that period. Now, take something like that into account, where spiritualism and spirituality in general, the questions, the everything, it was so much rich thought that this deck is considered the pure deck. And when you compare these two, well, some would prefer one over the other, some would prefer something that's more modern or whatever, but I really dig how they have different vibes, they originate from different times, and how one casts a shadow onto the other in the eye of the general public. This is some vital information if you want to, like, maybe sprinkle something interesting onto your own Taroka or Harrow decks. If you want to dive deeper into the topic of tarot and hear some pretty grounded opinions about it, analysis, I cannot stress enough how invaluable the channel from Benable Wen was. Let's talk about naming the cards. Have you ever thought about, like, wow, why are the names of all the cards in all the divination decks sounding so, like, mystical? They have some, like, intrinsic symbolism about them. What is it that makes people feel like these cards have been discovered and not, like, made? Almost like math, and math's full of symbols, I guess. Even in TTRPGs, like in our lore, it's either some demigod beings creating these cards, or it is some ancient civilizations that made these cards and now they are rediscovered. It's always something like that, and in the world where magic is plenty, it makes sense to make these cards be discovered and not made. Even if you don't know where they originate from, it's even better. It adds to the mystique. One thing that's for sure is that giving cards short names is vital.
The fewer words a magic sword's name has, the more dangerous it is. You don't want to be on the wrong end of Dark King Grootmore's Edge of Annihilation, don't get me wrong. But you for sure don't want to be on the wrong end of something called the Throngler.
And there's also a concept of power words, and you have heard this buzzword being thrown around a lot. But no, like, there is really, like, research being done about how certain words are culture dependent in a way. So for a certain culture, you have certain power words that are like a focal point of your image, of your sentence, of your card. Whenever people from that culture see it, it has like a deeper association with them. So either use something that's from your own culture, in the real world, that has some symbolic value, or maybe think of what are the power words in your RPG world. Maybe through explaining the names of the cards to players, and the cards have strange names that the players cannot really associate with, maybe they're learning about the world, the culture, through decoding the names of the cards. So it's just an interesting thought that I had. The other thing that I think is maybe more straight on when talking about naming and like the global appeal of naming that is used in tarot cards is what Carl Gustav Jung coined as the collective unconscious archetypes. So it's basically a collection of symbols and archetypes from which we derive human narratives. And I've seen an article that claimed like that Jung, with these archetypes, helped us discover our own inner tarot. So these archetypes are basically some symbols that you would encounter across different cultures, nations, everything. So for example, the mother, you can always see through the cultures the archetype of a mother, where regardless what the iconography is, how it is represented, male or female, or it is a little duck or whatever, you would still like connect it, that culture would connect it to loving, caring and nurturing figure. You can see like these archetypes popping up in pop culture, in movies, in books, in almost everything that people create. And there is a lot of these symbols inside the tarot deck as well. So certainly this is one of the reasons why we perceive it as some form of an artifact, be it stigmatized as occult or that it actually has some spiritual value. It is still perceived as almost like a magical item in the real world, right? There are other decks as well. There is, I think it's called Hafez fortune telling cards. There is OH cards. I've heard about and seen Oracle cards. Oracle cards are basically like tarot, the same idea, like divination decks, consisting of some symbols and words, but they don't follow like a strict guideline. They can have 78 cards, or they can have 32, 56, whatever. You can have as many cards as you want. They don't have a strict structure, so maybe I would take inspiration from these more so than tarot if I'm creating my own deck, just because maybe it's more flexible. You can see a bit more creativity there. There is also a sub-community of people that are much more interested in abstract tarot that doesn't have any imagery. They just have like abstract abstract paintings, splatters of paint. There is one that I've seen that's actually based on Rorschach splatters, and it's called Taro as a Color. I've seen it on a festival in Hungary. I think the abstract Taro is the next like distillation of the idea of Taro for some applications. The last interesting nugget of knowledge that I want to share is the use of these in-game cards in real-life divination. There is this video that I've seen that led me into the rabbit hole inside the rabbit hole, and it's this person explaining how they would much more prefer Harrow cards over Taro cards, because there is an adventure called The Harrowing in Pathfinder 1e where you're actually sucked into the deck and you get to meet the cards, you get to see how the cards interact between each other. So when you read your divination, you get like you're familiar with the cards, you feel more at home, and it is wild to me, but yeah, I can certainly see how that makes sense. You're kind of have a certain relationship that might be personal to you. So when you're reading to yourself, you have that interaction with the cards. You're reliving maybe some moments from the game. Maybe that associates you with something that you're struggling with. I don't know. It's quite interesting. The second thing, and now disclaimer, this is a touchy topic. There is a lot of Christians that are scared of Tarot because it is considered an occult thing, and they would still like to do some form of like introspection. And they think even if they use Tarot without divination, just for like some sort of introspection and analysis, that is not okay. So they go to Taroka, for example, and I've seen like people ask about this. Yeah, they feel more comfortable. They feel like it's a game. So at the end, I'm not for divination decks. I'm not against them, but I'm certainly fascinated with how these are affecting our society, how our society is affecting the decks, and the whole story about it, how it enters like some very strange subcultures and niche things. That's it. I will be cutting it short here. That's just a couple of things that I wanted to throw at the camera. I would like to ask you, if you're just exclusively a D&D player or a Pathfinder player, please, you don't have to look at my videos, but I would certainly like you to explore Taroka, explore Harrow. There is certainly something that you can find out from each of those systems. They have certainly a different approach. Of course, the last video will be about the intuitive reading, and you can always jump straight to that one. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this ramble about divination cards, and if you enjoyed this type of content, please like and share and subscribe, I guess. Subscribe. So that would be it from me. I'm leaving now. Yes, as always, keep on going, keep on loving, keep on being creative, play more D&D, and I will see you in the next one.
Farewell.